Hello, welcome to FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. Today, my guest is Parker One. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Parker. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. Thank you for having me again.
No problem. So, astute listeners to the podcast will recognize Parker from an earlier episode, an episode that we had to cut short. So, this is part two. And, I've got a bunch of new questions, but before we dive into, the newer questions, Parker, what do you do? And, a little bit about your background.
Mhm. Yeah, just real quick. I'm a primarily just a game developer. I focus on I specialize in gameplay development, but I've been kind of more of a generalist, especially recently. I worked on Halo Infinite for about like 4 years. I did a lot of their animation tech, a lot of their gameplay tech, and also I kind of like was kind of had my foot in a lot like basically the full stack of the AI characters in that game. And then afterwards, I left to start my own company. We kind of do a bunch of stuff now, but primarily we started out as a scripting language company. So I created a scripting language called Abstract. It was a language that can be edited in both text format and notecraft format. The idea was that it optimized the communication between programmers and non-programmers by having a language that can kind of support the format that both sides of the equation are comfortable with. Um, and Now we also do a good bit of like outsourcing work, and also we're kind of working on our own title, so we kind of do a bunch of stuff at this point. But yeah, I'm still working on Abstract, the company and the language, and yeah.
Okay, so in terms of abstract, why would somebody use that over JavaScript, Lua, or Go, for example?
Mhm.
And like on top of that, is it more oriented towards game developers because your previous your job was as a game developer?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the language was very much geared towards game development. I mean, it was an embedded only language, and one of the things that we wanted to do with the language was that it runs at C++ speeds, and it's very simple to use. Very simple kind of imperative paradigm kind of scripting. Um, but like actually we are kind of shifting away from the language itself and kind of focusing more on the editor at this point, because we put out our beta, last when we chatted last time. That was about like a couple of weeks into the beta release, and we've actually had a good bit of feedback that's kind of informed us on what people in the game industry are kind of looking for. And one of the things that we realize is that we don't actually have to have a language, because the core value proposition that we were offering was the translation tech that we were providing for node graph versus script, right? So the big idea was that we wanted to provide a scripting solution that allows people to use node graph or text based solution and kind of be able to go back and forth seamlessly, so that you have these teams of programmers and non-programmers working together, in especially in a game development environment. You have some people that want to use node graphs, but then some people really don't want to use node graphs. So the idea was that we have a solution that allows people to kind of communicate seamlessly with each other, even if one side wants to use a visual scripting language and the other wants to use text-based scripting language. One of the things that we realized from the beta and the feedback that we've gotten is that the language itself is a very simplistic language and doesn't necessarily have the kind of advantages that say like other languages like Lua, or like Skookum script and those others, a little bit more mature, a little bit more established scripting languages have, because they one of the things that we wanted to do with abstract was that it's all C++ speeds, which means that like the threading model was very simplistic, that the memory management model was like very simplistic, essentially didn't exist. So what we're actually doing now is shifting more towards just the IDE side of things. We are actually starting to work on an IDE that allows you to take any text-based scripting and then turn it into a visual scripting. and then be able to edit it, create new files and whatnot. And then when you just save it, it gets turned into any text-based scripting language of your choice. So now we started out as like a scripting language based company, but now we're actually a little bit more of an IDE kind of a company, working on a product that will allow you to basically take any scripting language and turn it into a node-graph based scripting language if you wanted to.
Okay. And does that mean work on abstract? I mean, the language itself has stopped or slowed down. And on top of that, what percentage of your users are using the editor with your language versus what percentage are using it with another language that you guys didn't create?
So abstract is still alive. We'll keep it alive, and the language itself will probably kind of just stick around in its probably in its current state for a while, because the language itself is very simplistic, and not much. You know, it can do what it needs to do in the current state. So for the most part, the IDE itself. So we are actually in the process of kind of updating abstract to be able to do this kind of general, take any language and turn it into a node graph, kind of a tech right now. So like people that's used abstract so far, it's 100% using the abstract language. Nobody's been able to get hands on with the translation tech that will allow any scripting language to be turned into a node graph. um, yeah. So but like in terms of the language itself, the work is definitely slowed down. I mean, like the language itself, we're not working on it at all, but really a lot of the work that we're doing right now is actually just turning the IDE into this new kind of paradigm of being able to take any language, and then just being able to turn it to node graph.
Okay. And when you're converting it into these graphs, using any sort of text-based language, are you using some sort of artificial intelligence model like ChatGPT or something similar, or like how is it working?
No, no. So we don't use AI. I'm actually, so I can't go into too much of the details because this is like very new stuff that I'm creating right now.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, but AI doesn't actually play a lot of, like ChatGPT and stuff. I've actually played around with it quite a bit, because one of the things that's like really exciting about it when it first came out was that it seemed like it could just write code, right? So one of the first things I tried was try to integrate ChatGPT into abstract language, just have it write some code for me, and then like like one of the things that node graphs typically will struggle with a lot, say like blueprints, is that ChatGPT integration will be really hard, because when you turn it into text format, it doesn't turn it into code; it turns it into this kind of almost like metadata about the node graph, right? Like node here, node there, link here, link there, kind of a thing. Um, but like, so I figured like, oh, maybe it'll be really good at like writing abstract, the language. Uh, but turns out like ChatGPT is not very good at programming, and GPT-4 as well. Like, it's not very good at actually coming up with like algorithms and like implementations of like actual problems.
Hmm.
It's very good at making it sound legit. So a lot of the times it will like make up functions and like come up with random names for like stuff that doesn't really exist. So we've actually like experimented with it a little bit, but it's not quite there yet. Maybe in the future we kind of take this tech and apply it, especially when abstract is able to handle all scripting languages. um but at the current state of the AI, it's not very useful in terms of writing the code. One of the things that, uh, although one big benefit of kind of taking the pivot that we're doing right now of like changing it so that it can work with any scripting language, is that we don't necessarily have to integrate the AI ourselves, because like it kind of works agnostically. I don't know if that's the right word. It's kind of like independent of the language itself, right? Like, so if someone comes up with a way of having a LLM based tool that can write like say Lua or like Python or whatever, Abstract will be able to leverage that just right out of the box, because Abstract will basically work with those languages, and then those tools will work with that language, so the language will kind of bridge our tool with the LLM model based tool kind of automatically. So for us, like the AI kind of stuff is kind of more in the background and happens automatically, kind of organically for us.
Okay. And on the topic of ChatGPT and just, AI technologies in general, what do you see its involvement in the development community of the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see our, jobs as programmers in a post, AI model, post ChatGPT, world, now that it is unleashed? Because, I use it a lot, I actually use it on a daily basis. I do agree with the things that you've said, that it isn't something, at least not right now, where it's just going to be writing sort of creative code, for you. But as
Mhm.
a tool itself, it can be very powerful in many ways as an alternative to a search engine. I think that's what it's really good for, is an
Mhm.
alternative to a search engine for a lot of queries. So
Mhm.
where do you see its involvement within the development community?
Well, I think when people talk about like AI nowadays, it's really just LLMs, right? Like, there's, like I think that's like the latest hottest AI development that's come out. So who knows like what other technologies and what other algorithms and what other techniques will come out that will kind of change everything. But LLMs themselves are really, you kind of, nailed it. Like it's kind of just a better search engine. And I think people are using it that way as well. So basically, like I use it the other day actually. I don't use it too much because a lot of the coding I do is like just like C++ based stuff that I've kind of been doing for a while, so I already know. I can, a lot of times I can do it faster than like I can tell ChatGPT what I want. But like one time what I did was I needed a function that can take uh like 3 points, and then like get the area of the triangle formed by those 3 points, like something like that. I didn't want to do the math. It's very simple stuff. If you look it up, just Stack Overflow will tell you exactly how to do it. But also, you can just scribble it on a piece of paper, and you kind of figure it out pretty easily. But I was like, I don't really feel like doing this. I have to like get this code in right now. So I just like asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave me like a template, and then I was able to kind of like shift the names around and make sure the types are actually going to work in this code base I'm working on. So that kind of stuff. It's basically like a replacement of Stack Overflow at that point, right?
Yeah,
Um,
but a bit more
yeah,
concentrated and less of the guesswork. Because if let's say
yeah,
you're trying to figure something out, maybe it's a sorting, basic sorting algorithm like bubble sort in C++ or JavaScript, for
hmm,
example, or you've
hmm,
got some error in your application, you can
hmm,
Google it. But I know
yeah,
Google's getting a bit better with kind of suggesting that I have the tab. But for the most part, you're opening 10 tabs. That's your workflow.
hmm,
Stack Overflow, Reddit, YouTube, and a few others. And within that, you probably go into a few other links and trying to find an answer. Whereas with ChatGPT, when you get good at it and you know how to ask the question, you
hmm,
literally just like give them the code or portion of the code, the error,
hmm,
and so many times it'll just come back, with a list of steps to fix it, or here's the code in C++ for bubble sort,
yeah,
and it is
absolutely, yeah,
just really optimized right now. I'd say for sort of brute force, search engine type of tasks without having
yeah.
millions of results.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does really streamline the process of like that we typically go through, like Stack Overflow and stuff. It really does streamline that process, and you're absolutely right about that. I think the only thing is like I think a lot of people are kind of scared, like, oh, is this gonna like take away my job and stuff? But no, I don't really think so because like like all 90% of what I do is like piping almost. Like getting like writing those algorithms and the kind of stuff that you do in school and stuff, it's really not that hard. Like most, like a lot of people, as can leverage Stack Overflow and figure those stuff out. The really hard part is kind of like integrating that stuff into an existing code base with a lot of variables and things kind of constantly changing. um and like I well, perhaps maybe we'll get to a world where LLMs get good enough, or there's some other AI technique that basically does all of that integration work for you as well, and it's like accurate enough that it's just like able to do it. But like at the moment, The issue is that like the nature of coding is that it's either 100% right or it's like it goes horribly wrong, right?
Yeah.
So it does at the moment, at least it still feels like it's just a very very optimized it's like an optimization tool for that kind of like Stack Overflow and like Google, like infinite tabs of Google Google searches kind of a process. It is very nice to be able to just ask ChatGPT, just like here, can you tell me how to do this, can you tell me how to do that, and it just kind of like tells you how to do it. One issue I see though is a lot of times it kind of just makes stuff up. um and that's been a little bit frustrating. So, like for example, I was working on some like problem with like .NET framework, and I was asking like, hey, in like .NET frame, like .NET 5, like how do I, like get this thing to like automate this process and stuff like that. And it told me like, hey, like you should use this library with like this class, and then if you go to this class, it has this function, and if you call it like this, it will do exactly what you want it to do. And then I tried it, and turns out that thing like doesn't exist, like it literally doesn't exist. So I think you kind of have to understand that it's a tool, that like it's just like, I think there will be a new generation of programmers that are more adept at using it than I am. um but I think there's still room for improvement in the tool, and also kind of a long way to go for a tool like that to kind of change how programmers work. Now,
Oh yeah,
art, on the other hand,
100%.
yeah, but like in the game development process, like programming is not the only thing, right? Like
No.
art, I think is going to get a huge change. I mean, it's happening right now, of like people's workflow changing and things being automated and things being made so much more efficient. um I think that has like a much more probability of it being like overhauled through this new AI tool.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like with the art side of things, there's a lot of the time where there's just grunt work, the filler work, but that takes a lot of time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that could, I mean, it's already, automated heavily with just technology and computers in general
Mm-hmm.
versus, manually creating frames, for example. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that part of it could be enhanced even more with, AI models. So, you do the core creative work, but then the filler stuff, the the time intensive tasks are
Mm-hmm.
actually just handled by an AI. And then obviously you as a human, you check it over, or let's say you have someone hired, let's say at a cheaper rate, maybe you're a senior artist and then you have a junior artist. Instead of the junior artist doing the filler work, they're checking the filler work. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
you'll get some of that where, and I think you're probably getting programming as well, where we won't eliminate programmers, but we'll have programmers that are, a slightly different role. They're,
Mm-hmm.
maintaining and doing some writing
Mm-hmm.
versus just doing all of the grunt, brute force, writing. I mean, I
Yeah.
just see
Yeah.
some of these tools akin to using a text editor, where they have IntelliSense, they have, highlighted code, they have, built-in terminals,
Mm-hmm.
plugins,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to run like VS Code. Once you like set it up really well, you can run, let's say, your project on iOS with a keyboard shortcut, on
Mm-hmm.
Android, and you can do a bunch of stuff on there versus coding it in a non-coding text editor like like you know WordPad or TextPad or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
then manually compiling it in command prompt or terminal, getting a million errors, and trying to fix it. Those days for most people are gone. Yeah, there's still some hardcore people that do that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's for the most part gone. And I think AI, Chat GPT, and these sort of tools are just going to further enhance that side of things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just like I said, the tedious tasks like writing documentation, writing comments, structuring code to be within a certain, set of coding standards for your organization. I think it's just gonna, optimize those tasks. Initially, I think those are really going to be the low hanging fruit, but the low hanging fruit that's going to yield a lot of noticeable benefit. One for the end user, aka the coder, and one for the person who actually, makes the tool or the plugin.
Yeah, yeah, that's totally true. I think just like a general um acceleration of how everybody kind of does all of these things. I think I'm really excited for that, and I think that is going to happen. Um, uh, and also, like, game industry is such a like deadline driven kind of industry, right? Because like
Mm.
it's so expensive, and you really have to get these things out really fast. And so like any sort of tool that kind of gives you that easy win of like, you use this tool, it's going to reduce your headcount by this percentage, and get your product out the door by like this much faster. Like, I think the industry will buy into that really fast. I think everybody's really excited about that. Although I think some folks are definitely concerned about, like, is my job going to be replaced? But I don't really think so. I think there's just going to be more studios. I think there's going
Yeah,
to be, yeah,
for
just
sure.
more titles coming out and stuff.
Yeah, more titles, whether it's the gaming industry or not the gaming industry. They say that all the time. They said that about the internet. They said that about computers in general. I
Mm-hmm.
think they said that about when electricity and machinery came, and you could heavily optimize tasks to be kind of automated.
Mm-hmm.
Pre computers, but not having to manually do it by hand. And they
Mm-hmm.
could just machine engineer it and get it the same literally every single time,
Mm-hmm.
faster, cheaper. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people, we didn't go from, I don't know, 5% unemployment to 95% unemployment. Unemployment just, it's just going up and down. But, other jobs are, getting created. And the reality is, if you're listening to this, and let's say you're a 30-year-old coder, yes, some of those, tools may displace your particular role right now, but that's up to you to adapt and figure it out how you can still stay relevant, because your core skills will just translate over, and it's not an overnight thing where tomorrow 90% of programs are eliminated. It would be okay, you know there's this new technology, slowly start using it, adapting to it, and
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. It's like how we have frame JavaScript frameworks like React, React Native, Angular, Flutter, all of these. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the time, most web development jobs are probably going to be in one of those sort of frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, especially the really high paid ones. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're still a typical HTML, JavaScript, CSS guy, then yeah, you're probably going to have less jobs available to you
Mm-hmm.
outside of legacy websites and platforms. But if
Mm-hmm.
you know adapted, learned one of the other frameworks or a couple, you probably would have been okay. So that's really what it comes down to, is more the adaptation side of it.
Yeah, and also like game industry is still a massively like growing industry. If you
Mm.
look at the amount of cash coming into the industry through investments and also just straight up revenue, it's if you, the trends are still up, like way up. Like compared to like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's basically been doing a hockey stick and hasn't. It's still going at it. So like as an industry, I think the game industry is probably okay. I think AI, the really scary part is probably in other industries where it's not necessarily growing, or maybe like some parts of it are much 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 easier to kind of automate. I think a lot of people are talking about, like the logistics of, like trucking industry and things like that. Like those things will probably be, will have a very different experience than like something like a game industry, where one, like the effect that this has on the industry is that we get to make more games and faster, and while the industry growth is able to support that, whereas like other industries may not be able to do something like that. So yeah, like I'm I think we're kind of in like a bit of a privileged position in terms of like how AI is going to interact with us, because we're kind of set up in the position where we're primed to be able to take advantage of it rather than be kind of usurped by it, if you will. You know?
Yeah, and I think as humans and as humanity wants to progress, even if a whole field or even industry gets wiped out over a period of years or a decade or two, because we want to advance, and there comes the surplus of people available to work, new industries will just get created other industries will just grow. If you look at, you know, well, no, probably 100, years ago, when they used to have, in the olden days, trains, before they had, I think, hydraulic or style brakes, they actually had people standing on top of the trains that would put a rod down and actually turn it to manually brake. Very dangerous job. Obviously, you're at the top of the train, and if you get people out on every single carriage doing that, I mean, that job is no longer around. Like that job went away a long time ago. So
Hmm.
that isn't like a field, a career path that got eliminated with that sort of hydraulic braking system. But again, it comes down to that thing: the unemployment didn't just surge and stay high. Those people or the generations after, they just got jobs in other fields. So even if fields are eliminated, and I think, like you said, some logistic ones, some admin based ones, will be able to get reduced or optimized,
Hmm.
there'll just be an opportunity to retrain and go into something else.
Sure, yeah. It's funny you say that because actually, when I was at GDC this year, we went to the trolley museum. I think it's a trolley. I think that's what it's called. Those like San Francisco carts that go up and down those hills and stuff. They actually still have people doing that manually. It's like such an old system. It's got like cables running underground, and there's a person that has to like do the cranking thing to grab onto the wire and let go at the right times to go around like up and down hills and stuff. And but yeah, like that thing is like, you're absolutely right. It's like totally gone, and people have adapted. I think these kind of like impacts that people are talking about, the ones that are like grabbing headlines and stuff. If you go up to the global scale, I think it is a little bit scary, um, because there's a lot of people and a lot of things that needs to get done, and also people kind of rely on those jobs to for their livelihood and stuff at like a scale of 8 billion people. I think there will be some significant changes and cultural changes, that people have to adapt to, and it won't be very pretty for everyone. But yeah, in the US, like in the game industry, it's definitely not the worst thing.
So yeah, in reality, these shifts that we might see with AI models like ChatGPT or automation is just akin to, let's say, you're working in a company, you see the writing on the wall that the company's going down. Maybe they've made some bad, financial decisions or a few bad product launches, and you decide, I'm gonna jump to another company. I've seen people do that, and their career's fine because they saw it happening, or they thought they saw it happening, and they just jump to a different company. Sometimes they change career paths. Sometimes, like, from one type of programmer to another type of programmer, or one type of technical person to another, or something totally different. But then they are still fine. And the question is, if, let's say, you're a truck driver, you're seeing all this sort of AI automation, and you're thinking, genuinely thinking, this will replace my job. It's not something that's going to replace it tomorrow. It's like, it's going to take a bit of time. If it's going to replace my job, let's say, over the next 10 years, 10 years is a long time to, retool up. Yes, you can use the excuse, I shouldn't have to, or that I don't want to, or that it's hard for me because I'm older. But again, that's a choice you have to make, and that's a choice you have to live with. It's no different to you eating 10 donuts a day, and you know if you go down that path, eating 10 donuts a day and a bunch of other rubbish food, you made that choice. Nobody's forced you to have that. You don't get fat and sick and unhealthy overnight. It takes a bit of time. And if you choose to continue going down that path, or in the case of the lorry driver, if you continue not to adapt and learn some new skill, train up, maybe it's going back to university, college, maybe it's just doing some sort of, evening class or whatever it is, that's totally up to you. And you can't feel sorry for that individual, then, you have to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of challenging. for some people, you say you got like, mortgage, and you're already like working multiple jobs to like support you and your family, and you got like multiple kids, and I think it can be pretty challenging, and people
Oh,
can have a pretty
100%.
tough time. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of folks are kind of scared of. So yeah, I don't know. I think I, it's one of those things, like it's not like a technical problem, right? It's like a very much like a societal, cultural kind of a issue, and some people will have a very bad time with it, to put it kind of mildly. Um, so yeah, it's a I I don't know. Like, yes, personal responsibility is kind of how is something that we must all have and must learn to um exercise. But I think, and there's also an aspect of like this is inevitable.
Mm.
um but I think it is a difficult situation, nonetheless, for some people. And I think, you know I think it is, I don't know. I wonder like how much like other like the society as a whole needs to be responsible for it. But I do kind of definitely feel like a sense of like, oh, like if I could help, if there was something I could do to kind of help with that, I think I definitely lean towards of looking for those options, and kind of seeing like what can we do, like asking that question and trying to answer it.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I think obviously society, as a whole, whether that's the government, whether that's these companies, whether it's your community. Yes, we can definitely do more to, I guess, open people's minds about what's coming up, educate them, help them, adapt, and obviously, it's partly down to the companies as well. I'm not a lorry driver, but I doubt the major lorry driving companies are telling their employees that this is what's coming up. You need to retool. You need to
Hmm.
shift up and basically get out, or do something else on the side. Start learning. It's gonna be a while. Might be 5 years. Might be
Yeah.
10 years. But start taking some evening classes. Once a week, once every couple of weeks. That's all you need. So not
Hmm.
too much of a heavy burden. But start
Hmm.
doing it now. And the thing is, there's not an incentive for them to do that, because what'll end up happening is people start leaving once they're tooled up before they have to leave.
Hmm.
Before the AI and the, let's say, the regulations as well, because that's another big part of it, is
Hmm.
in place. So yeah,
Yeah.
they don't want to do that, and they don't need to do it. Like there's no
Yeah.
advantage. There's no advantage to them wasting their time talking about those things. But yeah, like we were saying, it is a huge part of self, having responsibility. There's nothing wrong with hearing these things, seeing these things, and being a bit shocked. But the
Mhm.
problem is, if you hear it today and in 2 years' time you still haven't taken one step to do anything about it, that's where the problem lies. And because
Mhm.
yeah, you might get shocked a bit, you might take a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month to really wrap your head around it. You might start weighing up your options, talking to your spouse, figuring out your financial situation. There's nothing wrong with that. But like I said, if years go by and you just basically blame this technology, but you knew about it and you believed it 2 3 years ago, then like you definitely can't feel sorry or for that person if they've let that much time go by without taking any action, and just hoping some sort of savior will come and help them, whether that's the government or whether that's maybe the AI, or the new technologies failing.
Well, like I would agree that like the company doesn't have any responsibility in, kind of doing something for the workforce. Like, I mean, like companies, the motivation and the goal behind the company isn't um just to provide livelihood. Companies have other responsibilities, like providing value for their customers, and creating value for their shareholders and whatnot. It's more complicated than that. But whereas like the government, like I don't know. Isn't that the point of the government? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it
they're
should
supposed
be,
to be
but
for it.
they start
Not
doing
that it
all
works
that
out
other
there.
stuff.
Yeah, not that it works out that way, but at
Yeah.
least theoretically, it does seem like the responsibility should kind of fall on the government. But at the same time, we work kind of very like we either work in the tech industry or we are very adjacent to it in the game industry. So I think we also have like an advantage of being able to understand what this actually means and what's going on here. But I think a lot of people, like say you're running like a small business, and it has nothing to do with tech. Say you're like running like I don't know, some small like manufacturing company or something like that. Or I mean, even that's like pretty techy. Maybe you're like a catering company, or like
Hmm.
there's a whole plethora of different business that people are running right now, and and every single one of those things are kind of impacted by this new technology. I think the government definitely has a role in this, but at the same time, like there's such a small subset of people that actually understand AI and like what it is. I mean, it doesn't take a lot if you understand how programming works and like how these computers work in general. I think it's not too crazy to understand like the general idea behind AI, but I think 99% of the global population has like just a sci-fi understanding of what AI is,
Mm.
So I think it can be very confusing for them to be able to understand it to a point where they can kind of respond to it in a very forward thinking, like, oh, in 3 years down the line, this is how things are going to be, and this is how AI is going to impact my industry. I think that is like a bit of a hard thing to ask people to do, just because like it is challenging if you have no technical knowledge, right? Like, say your entire life you've just been like you just are like a carpenter. Technology helps you, sure, but like your main job is building, like, say, houses. Like, I think it can be very challenging, in that point, to like understand what AI is, right? So I can see that, and I think like I have the hope that like governments around the world is able to understand this and kind of try to help the people, but at the same time, it's not like people in the government really understand what AI is either. So yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. Plus, again, the thing to remember, I think people forget, the government is just comprised of humans,
Yeah.
and any human has motivations.
Hmm.
Like the reality is, what benefit and what motivation does that, like, let's say, that person in power that has that platform that could
Hmm.
potentially get the message out there, like, if there's no real advantage of them taking up some initiative to create awareness about AI, and it might actually be against their goals of, let's say, if they're a politician but they want to become prime minister or president one day in 10, 20 years, if it might actually be against that based on party support that they may not be able to get, and fundraise,
Hmm.
invest, donors that might say no to it, maybe they're a bit more old school,
Hmm.
then like that's the other thing, like the motivation's not there either. So it is,
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of responsibility on the individual to seek out out knowledge, and
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be on AI. It can be on fitness, it can be on just different jobs,
Mhm.
whatever it is, on the financial system, on how
Mhm.
tax works, on how money works. Yeah,
Mhm.
ideal world, our schools would teach us financial literacy, would teach us maths in a more practical fashion, but
Mhm.
they don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can, you know, blame the government and the schools all day long, but
Mhm.
that doesn't change the years that have gone by where you didn't get that knowledge. It's up to
Yeah.
you to seek that knowledge. Now, it's like when I hear, and I was the same when
Mhm.
I was at school, and I'm sure you had these excuses as well, that, oh, I didn't know what was going to come up on the exam because our teacher was away, or we had supply teachers, or our teacher was rubbish. And it's like, but and what? Like, the exam board is not going to, say, oh, your teacher was not the best, so we'll, lower the grade boundaries by 10%. They're going to be like, okay, not our fault.
Mhm. Yeah. It's yeah. I don't know. Like, is anybody really out there like blaming folks like for like not taking, because like I think like a lot of people are kind of, I think what's a lot of the times what's happening is that people are simply struggling, um and there are hardships in life, and it happened in this case. It happens to be based on AI, but I think generally when people kind of hit these hard moments in their lives, they want to express it and kind of just put it out there that they are struggling with this portion of their lives.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's necessarily like a thing about like blaming or anything like that. It's just more like there are people that are struggling. And it's just a natural consequences of these inevitable changes that are happening in the world, and also these changes are happening very, very fast nowadays. Um, and
That is true.
yeah,
I mean, I feel like it is a very British thing of blame and
mm,
negativity.
mhm.
There is
Oh,
definitely that within the British,
mhm,
culture
mhm,
and ethos that okay, they're the person to blame because I
mhm,
don't know how. I mean, you might be able to tell me, but how landlords, people who rent out properties, just to individuals, not commercial, but just flats, houses, that sort of stuff, are perceived over in America. Because in the UK, if you've got like your own house and maybe one or two other houses, nobody
mhm,
really has an issue with that for the most part. But if you end up being a person, let's say you did well in your job, let's say
mhm,
doctor, you
mhm,
worked hard, you saved money, you was prudent with your expenses, you invested, and at the end of your let's say you're 60 and you've got 50 houses, which
mhm,
there are people out there like that, even more
mhm,
houses possibly. Like you ask the average British person, they
mhm,
get really mad about that. They get
mhm,
like, oh, they're the people to blame. That's the reason why rents are so high. The
mhm,
government should take away those houses. They should make it illegal to own that
mhm.
many houses. You don't need more than one, maybe one extra to rent out. Like they get really, really, mad about something like that. I feel like that's not the case in America, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no, US is no different. Like there's a lot of I don't know if hate is too strong of a word, but a lot of negativity and a lot of finger pointing and a lot of just general anger
Mm.
in media, but also in just general culture. Like that's I think prevalent here as well. uh and you can especially if you follow like American politics, there's a lot of hate nowadays.
Yeah, that's
From
true.
both sides. I just personally tend to be a lot more centrist, and I definitely kind of try to see things more as like consequences of just natural evolution of things, and not necessarily one side being evil or the other. Because I just feel like people are just all trying their best, and nobody has control over everything. So
Yeah,
no,
one
no,
hundred
no
percent.
real, yeah. But in terms of like what people think in general, I think there is a ton of negativity. I would say, yeah, there's a lot of blaming going on all the time. I just personally try to like stay out of it. I don't want to blame anybody. I don't think anybody's like intentionally doing something wrong or anything like that. I think people are just going about their lives. That's far beyond technology and finding jobs and careers and all that, right? Like life's, you want to have, kids and grow and like have a life and like memories and all. There's so much more emotional things and complicated things like that that kind of impact individuals' lives that like nobody's a perfectly rational being, right? So I don't know. Yeah, no, plenty of blame going around nowadays. I just try to take a stance more of like a there's nobody really to blame. People are just kind of going about their lives, just things kind of happening organically.
Yeah, 100%. And before I move on, to some other questions, like even if there is someone genuinely to blame, you as the person living your own life, you still need to move on with your life. Like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's
like
true. That is true. Yeah,
if you
yeah.
go into the extreme
Mhm,
example, let's say
mhm,
if you're just walking down the street, you've done nothing to no one, you're a nice person,
mhm,
somebody comes up and chops your hand off. Like,
mhm,
yeah, obviously that person's to blame, but
mhm,
if you spend the next 50, 60 years of your life constantly thinking about that, constantly, blaming that person, constantly talking about it,
mhm.
and not moving on with your life, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's a personal choice. Like obviously it
Yeah.
hurts physically, it
Mhm,
hurts mentally, it is hard, obviously, let's say to live without a hand. There'll be an adjustment period, but it
mhm.
gets to a point where you have to move on. Like you
Yeah.
have to try to move on. And
Mhm.
so even if there's genuine blame, you as an individual, you choose like how you're going to live your life, how are you going to live your day? Is it going to be full of hate and negativity, or you're going to say, okay, what's happened has happened. I'm going to move on. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to work, spend time with family, enjoy life, try and make the most of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the best we can do, and it's what we got to do, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, with abstract, what language do you use to create it? Plus, what language do you use to create the editor as well?
hmm So we've been actually using C# and .NET for until basically the beta release, but we're actually switching over now. We're switching everything over to C++ and Qt based. It's .NET is very good for making something fast.
Hmm.
WPF very easy to learn and use. C# also, but I think last episode I also complained quite a bit about the garbage collection and the kind of issues that you can kind of run into it. And initially, when I started, I figured C# will kind of make it easier to develop a product in, because you're one, like, the language is a little bit easier to write features in, because you don't have to worry about as many things. But I also figure it'd probably be easier to like hire folks to work in C# and WPF. But my understanding now is like you end up with so many more other issues using C# that I think this is the right switch to make, especially now that we're pivoting the product quite hard at this point from like an actual language plus IDE to just an IDE that works with any language. It did seem like a right switch to make, albeit very expensive switch to make. Um, but it does seem like using C++, even if it can be a little bit more tedious to do stuff on a daily basis, on the long run, I think it kind of reduces the amount of headache that you end up with that you did not foresee at the beginning of the project.
Oh yeah, for sure. Some of these, higher level programming languages, the time to, your minimum viable product, your MVP,
Mhm.
can be very quick sometimes. But then, you sometimes need to go to something a bit more low level.
Mhm.
Use
Yeah.
something else. It
Yeah.
can be beneficial to
Yeah.
try something, else out. In terms of like your development environment, what does
Mhm.
that look like? Your current development environment, physically in terms of like desk setup, monitors, computer, OS, and IDEs, that sort of stuff.
Oh, even like the physical setup.
Yeah, physical and like the actual stuff that's on your computer.
Gotcha. I'm like a bit of a geek in terms of like computer stuff. So I have like this wall mount PC with like there's a
What, the
3080.
PC itself is wall mounted, not the
Yeah,
monitor.
the PC is wall mounted. It's like I'm looking
Okay.
up at it right now. I kind of
But is it like a big tower or is it like a mini PC?
No, it's a big tower size thing. And it's
I'm
like
I'm
hanging off
hoping that's a
the.
solid wall and not a stud wall then.
Well, it is a stud wall.
Oh.
It's the TV mount is put into like the wall stud, so it should be strong enough.
Okay, okay. So,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so you've got the support there.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But it's a TV mount. It can hold up to 100 pounds, and I measure the computer. It's not 100 pounds.
Oh,
But yeah,
is it
and
99?
but
The fan starts spinning a bit too fast, and then
yeah, maybe the vibration will throw it off.
yeah.
But yeah, and it's like it's running a Ryzen's. Frick, I forget the actual um the model of the CPU because it's been a while. But oh yeah, so it's a Ryzen 7 5800X. 8-core processor. It's pretty fast for, especially when I'm doing like compiling like huge projects and stuff. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's water cooled, all in one. And this 3080 Ti, I actually slept outside of a Best Buy to get in line to get it because it was during the pandemic and there was a
Oh
huge
yeah, they were
shortage.
hard. I mean, yeah, GPUs were so hard to get. I remember I
Yeah.
bought a 3080 Ti just to sell.
Uh
I mean,
huh.
just to flip. I mean, the funny thing is, when I placed the order, they were probably going for, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10% more
Mm-hmm.
than the retail price. I totally forgot about it 'cause it took so long, and
Yeah.
and it arrived, and I was like, I don't remember ordering a graphics card. I had a look, and I remember I did, but it was such a long time ago. By the
Yeah.
time I actually got it, the price difference of retail to the second hand market, but even though it's technically new, was like,
Mhm.
I don't know, in dollars must be what, about $800, nearing $1,000.
Mhm.
And I mean, I was very happy with that. So I just sold it. I was put it in marketplace. Someone came within like a day or two, and they just took it, and they was like, no haggling, no nothing. They were super pleased.
Yeah, absolutely. At that time was kind of crazy at the time. Like there, nobody could
Yeah.
find one. Like this one, there was like an event going on. This is actually like the actual NVIDIA Founders Edition card, and that was really
Ah,
hard to come by. So that's why I
yes.
stepped outside of the Best Buy. And yeah, but yeah, I've been super happy with it. It was definitely overpriced. NVIDIA is definitely pushing the price up quite a bit. But I was like, whatever. Like, I want this, and I was building a PC for abstract at that point, really, because I didn't. My old PC was terrible, and I've been saving money on it. So like this one, I kind of definitely splurged on it. But yeah, that's the general setup. I got like 32 gigs of RAM. And I somehow blow through it. Like I almost max this out like on a
I
regular
mean, you
basis.
always do. It's one of those things. I think my Mac Pro, the trash can one, I think that has 64 gig of RAM. My Windows custom build has 32 gig of RAM, and they're always maxing out.
Yeah, yeah, because
They're
like
like, it's one of those things that I don't know if you ever get this, but non-programmers and people that aren't really in the technical industry, they'll say to me that, how are you maxing it out? All you're doing is, writing code. And it's
Mhm,
like some of these tools can be pretty heavy. Then you got Chrome that's bloody heavy, in itself, which you don't think
mhm,
it should be, but it is. Then if
yeah.
you add in some debugging tools or like a Photoshop or Premiere Pro, some of these other things, before you know it, you got some pretty hefty, RAM requirements.
Yeah, and also like when I wrote abstract for the first time, like it was very inefficiently written. Like it was like about like a couple months into the development process, I tried this like huge project, and it was like taking up like 5 gigs of RAM with a couple of tabs open. I had to do a lot of work to bring that down. But yeah, like it can get eats up memory pretty fast, and also like it's when you have the memory for it, you also start running more things, right? So I definitely max this out quite a bit. Yeah, and it's like running in terms of like the hard drives and stuff, it's like M.2, NVMe kind of like 1 terabyte drive, and there's like another like 2 terabyte just normal SSD on the backside. um and like in terms of the monitor setup, it's just like a 4K monitor in the center, and I got two 1080p monitors on each side, vertically. So I got like email, chat, and whatever on the left side, and on the right side, I got like documentation or whatever, and then the center, I'm like actually doing the work. Um, and I got like a custom keyboard that I built. This is a Zilios V2 keyboard with like I really get into like the custom keyboard stuff, so it's like all individually lubed and stuff. And like a vertical ergo mouse. So that's kind of like my general setup. And I got like this like microphone, uh that set up like arm kind of thing set up. This is basically just what like the same microphone that like Joe Rogan uses. That's why I got it.
Ah, that one. I mean, I
Yeah, it sounds
really
really nice.
want his, mic arm.
Mhm,
Obviously he uses it, but there's a lot of other people that are using it as well. Now that
mhm,
sort of really heavy look, the one when he just presses it down, you can just tell,
mhm.
it's got a bit of strength to it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. The Microsoft microphone arm, it feels really nice. I mean, like it kind of just holds its place really nicely, so I can move it around, and it just kind of stays there really nicely. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a really nice one. And the headphones are DT or Bear Dynamics DT 880. Sorry, no, this is 990. So yeah, these are the actual like fully open back ones. Yeah, that's the general physical setup. In terms of like coding, I actually just use Visual Studio for like all the building and like finding symbols and stuff. And I also use Sublime Text a lot. Um,
Sublime is so good for opening small
so
files.
Yeah, I mean, also like I kind of come from the background of like writing on Linux with like make files and like just writing, like setting everything up manually, back in college days. So that kind of habit just stuck with me pretty much the whole time. So I kind of tend to do like all the building and like all the like looking through the code base kind of stuff with Visual Studio because that's really nice. But in terms of like actual coding, I do a lot of it in just like Sublime Text. Um, and I use Git is obviously really nice. I typically I just use GitHub Desktop unless I have to, like there's some commands that's not like you know included in GitHub Desktop. I'll do it like manually through like PowerShell, something like that. But yeah, that's the general overview. Yeah.
Okay. And what would be, let's say, if money was no, object, what would be your dream setup? Like, how would you elevate? Like, if I gave you, you know, limited money tomorrow, how would you elevate that setup?
I mean, I don't know. I This is like also customized at this point that I'm pretty happy with it. I don't know if there's anything I'll really change. I mean, I'll probably like. I mean, I would always, if I had the money for it, like always keep updating the CPU and the GPU and stuff. Like I
Max
would,
RAM,
yeah,
the
and
highest
more.
NVMe storage. Like, actually, here's a question.
Yeah.
Like, I've been thinking about this a fair bit. A PC fully NVMe? Like, what do you think? Obviously, it's practical to have a PC that's full SSD now, cost wise, unless you're storing loads, but then you probably want to use maybe some sort of external storage, raided with it. But, like, just generally speaking, NVMe and just, having the secondary and the tertiary drives as SSD is more than practical. But how about fully NVMe?
I mean, it's got benefits. Like I certainly enjoy it because like I have like repos and stuff, or like like a lot of like movie files and stuff like that. That's like going upwards of like dozens of gigabytes that I have to shift around to like make space and stuff like that. And I definitely get the benefit out of that. The faster the better. That's for sure. So I think like if you are kind of into this like hardcore, like you got a lot of stuff going on in your computer kind of a person, absolutely, yeah, go all the way. Yeah, yeah. Like for me, like the other day, I was like trying to shift like on my like this Windows machine, I got like a C drive and like a like D drive that was like both NVMe and it's super nice, right? Because I got like 100 gigs of movies that I wanted to like shift over from my C drive to my D drive, and it's like yeah, a couple minutes, like or like yeah, like super fast, super nice.
Yeah,
If you
super
got the
fast.
money for it, if you got the motherboard for it, just go for it. I mean, of
Yeah,
course, you
having the
gotta have a
motherboard
use
is one of
for it.
those
Yeah.
things,
I
yes.
mean, I would say that like 99.9% of the people out there, like even programmers, right? Like they don't really have this kind of usage case for like
No.
this sort of like level of usage. So like for most people, I would say like this kind of setup is overkill. But I just personally kind of indulge myself in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's one of those things. Like, when you get a bit more disposable income, you start have you have these certain hobbies that those things that you want to upgrade, collect, or improve on. For some people it's cars, some people it's
Yeah.
computers,
Mhm.
holidays, whatever it is. But definitely going from a mechanical hard drive to
Mhm.
something flash based SSD
Oh
or
yeah.
an NVMe, like that jump, like when you notice it, you just like it is nice. Obviously,
Big jump.
the Windows boot times obviously
Mhm.
was the first thing that you see, but then just the transferring of files. Like, if you just got all SSD type of storage, like
Mhm.
just transferring files, you're just like, oh, that's not too bad. Like, I can transfer a pretty big file,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take a big chunk of my day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's super nice, and especially if you kind of have to like, like you want to check something out quickly, or like you want to try something out, like download like a game to try out, and then you just want to try it for like 10 minutes or something, just for like a testing something, you know. It's super nice. Like games nowadays, like 100 gigabytes, like,
Oh yeah,
and you
more
gotta
than
like
for
make
some.
space. Yeah, yeah. It's like move stuff around. Super, super convenient. It's like for most people it's just not really relevant, but yeah, if you're using it that way, absolutely. I mean, like I think like honestly though, like on that question of like would I like upgrade anything for like more money and stuff. I don't know. I think I'm pretty happy with the current setup. This is about as like good as my senses can tell the differences between, you know. So like I think I'm pretty happy with the sex setups for the most part.
Yeah. Okay. And like in terms of your studying, you spoke about, university. What
Mhm,
did you study at university?
mhm,
How important do you think going to university is to be successful in programming,
mhm,
have some sort of, career in there? And what
mhm.
resources would you recommend for learning coding outside of obviously uni itself?
So when I went to Caltech, and it was uh I don't know, like, so I learned a lot, and but one of the things I really learned at university isn't just programming. Like I learned a lot about like math and physics and stuff like that, which I was like kind of really interested in anyways. But that actually kind of gave me like a very strong mathematical foundation that helped me out throughout my career. Like, whenever I need to do any sort of like math to figure out like how to, I don't know, like I've been working with a like blend spaces like on and off like for basically the entire duration of my career, and that kind of stuff can be kind of mathy. You kind of have to understand like how things, like how, like, say like barycentric coordinates and stuff like that work, and also graphics can be kind of mathy too. You do have to understand linear algebra pretty well. Well, not to the level of like a physics, someone working in like tensor math, and like doing like with like gravity or gravitational fields, like something like that. Not quite like that level, but 3D space, and like understanding how quaternions work and stuff like that kind of stuff can be very, very helpful. So uni is very helpful in kind of giving you, especially those like really technical schools can be very helpful in kind of getting that foundation up, and that kind of stuff can be a little bit hard to learn on your own. Although, like, the stuff that you need for game development, I think to a large extent you cannot learn on yourself, by yourself. I would say like the biggest benefit that I got out of university was my TA experience. I specialized in graphics programming, GPU programming. They called it GPU. It was like general purpose GPU programming. And I actually ended up teaching the introduction to graphics. It was like an OpenGL class, and you kind of just did a lot of that, like OpenGL projects. And like at the end of it, you did like a very basic ray tracing thing it was a CPU based thing, but you could, if you wanted to, you could also write in GPU as well. Um, so I taught that class, and I also taught a GPU programming class that was like CUDA based, where people were just learning how to work with GPUs, and like how the memory layout is set up, and how all the different processors are set up in the GPU, and like why things need to be laid out in a specific way when working with GPUs and stuff like that. And like, that knowledge, I think you can definitely Google it and figure it out. But the part that you can't really figure out is like I had to read a ton of student written code to grade them and like help them fix it, and like help them get through the assignments and stuff like that. And that experience is absolutely invaluable, because like, you know everybody, especially at that student level, people are writing all sorts of kinds of code, like all sorts of different kinds
Oh
of
yeah.
styles. There was like also like the GPU programming class was like kind of like it's like a grad school level class, so there was a lot of grad students, and there was also a lot of like Chinese national grad students that weren't so good at English. So some, like, one assignment, for example, like all the comments they had somehow written in Chinese into the thing, and I guess the person figured that I was Chinese and wrote all the comments in Chinese. I'm Korean actually, so I had no idea what that was. So I actually have to go through. So I
Yeah.
had to go through, and all the variable names were like not properly named. It was like R, like single character variable names. So I actually had to go through and like replace them with like names I was like reading through, and like replace the variables in as I go to like understand what the hell's going on. But that experience actually made me like really, really good at just jumping into any code base and just kind of figuring things out by just reading the code. And that is probably more important than knowing how to write any sort of algorithm. Like just being able to jump into any code base and just like read the code, understand what the architecture is, like how things are supposed to be put together, and like what is going on when there's like some piece, like complicated piece of algorithm that will serve you like better than like anything else you can learn at uni. Because like everything that you learn in like school classes and stuff, like any you can just do projects. Like just go and like Google like how to write a game engine in OpenGL, and you learn like basically everything I taught in that class. Go learn like CUDA basics or something like that, and you'll probably it'll take you some time, but you can definitely learn all the like the fundamental information that I actually um, taught in that class. But like the ability to just kind of read code only comes with practice, and that obviously you can practice that as well, but kind of going to uni and putting yourself into those like kind of positions where you're working closely with professors and you're working with a bunch of different kinds of students and being forced to read a ton of bad code will pay dividends for years. Like that is probably the best skill I have. So you know, not it's not again, it's kind of going back to the personal responsibility that you were talking about before, right? Like it's what you make of it that makes it really, really good. And I think I kind of just stumbled into these opportunities, but those things where like it wasn't necessarily what the it wasn't like, there's no class teaching you these things, but university makes it easy to like kind of find those opportunities. And those opportunities can be very, very valuable. um yeah.
Okay, and like in terms of because you get a lot of famous developers out there, and you get YouTubers as well. Are there
Mhm.
any developers that are personal heroes of yours, or YouTubers that you really like and that you would recommend?
I don't know if any of them are like my like heroes. I don't know if I have any like heroes.
Do you know
Yeah.
how like how you have like John Carmack, for example, and
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
very well liked for someone like that. Again, you might not be that fussed by him, but like is there anyone that's like your go-to one?
Well, the thing is, like, I've never read their code. Like, John Carmack, obviously, he's done awesome stuff, but it's not like I've ever
Yeah.
seen the stuff that he's written. I'm sure like he's also done some crazy stuff, especially back when like he was the only like engine programmer on the team or something like that. I'm sure he's done some crazy stuff. But like I think for me actually like my heroes are more in terms of like kind of business leaders. Because like I think I've come to respect that quite a bit, especially while like running abstract. I come from like a very technical background, so back then I'll probably say like John Carmack, or there's a guy on YouTube called Cherno. He's writing an engine by himself called Hazel Engine, and it's
Yes.
making good, huge progress. I don't know if you've ever had him on your podcast and stuff, but that'd be like
I haven't
cool.
had him on the podcast. I have actually, emailed him. I've reached out to someone like I would like to get onto the podcast. So if he's listening, hit me up.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've seen his videos. I've seen the work that he's making on Hazel, and yeah, he's definitely made a lot of progress. Like when you
Oh yeah.
see what it is now,
Mhm.
you look at it and think like, okay, it's a pretty decent engine in terms of being able to do stuff. I mean, he says himself that if you want to, create a commercial game, don't use it. But like
Yeah.
you can do some decent stuff with it. Like you could
Yeah.
create some sort of tech demo with it.
Yeah.
And considering he's done that, as far as I'm aware, by himself, I don't think he's had really any help.
Mhm.
As
Oh,
far as I'm
also
aware.
he's got his community that like helps him out with stuff, and then he can
Yeah,
go
but
into like
you know
his
how
own.
it is. Like you got the
Yeah.
community there, but most of the work is still probably
Oh
him.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
saying if there's not
Absolutely.
a team or other coders he's hired or anything,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good luck, man. Like if you get Cherno on the thing, that'd be really cool. Because like, man, he's a smart dude. Um,
And
but
he'll
like
be a
I
very
yeah.
sort of technical, low level sort of podcast, I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thing is, like, in terms of my heroes, like, what I've come to kind of realize is that, like, the technology, like, there's a lot of people out there that can write code like this. The
Mm,
hard part is like in terms of like these things becoming so famous and like so well known and things like that is much more so about like how these tools and these kind of products get integrated and like they form like this ecosystem around them. Like if you look at like Unreal Engine, right, it's not the best, like I wouldn't say it's like the objectively the best engine in the world.
hmm
You look at the architecture, it's pretty wonky in different places. Like it's not everything like actors and like components and things like that kind of like makes sense, and like how you're supposed to compose your gameplay systems and things like that. But like when you kind of really get into it, like okay, everything's object, but then uh like actors are supposed to be composed of components, but then like you have like a pawn that can have a pawn movement component, but like when you set the input into the pawn, it goes to the component movement pawn movement component, and then the default behavior there is to go back to the pawn and then set the input there. Like there's some wonky things in like how like Unreal is kind of architected in terms, especially in terms of the gameplay stuff. Like it's not the like I wouldn't say it's like the quote unquote best, you know, architecture in the world, but what Unreal did really, really well is kind of build this ecosystem around themselves, right? Like there's a million YouTube tutorials out there. They almost don't document their own stuff, but there's a million people out there documenting their stuff for them. And those kind of stuff is not a that's not a technical problem to solve. That is more like putting yourself out there as a tool, and then get like kind of gaining traction is that's more of a business problem to kind of build that kind of a user base and that kind of like a community around your product. And I think that kind of stuff, I think, you know, like I don't know, like I think Epic Games as like a organization has done that very, very well. Like I don't know if you can put this all on Tim Sweeney. I'm sure Tim Sweeney had like a huge role in writing the engine and stuff like that, but
In the
you know,
early days, but obviously
yeah,
now, like there's so many,
yeah,
coders, so many people that have come up that know technologies and let's say certain way in certain methodologies that
mhm,
he's just not, akin to. He doesn't need to be anymore.
yeah,
Like obviously the money motivation is no longer there. He's older now. He's
yeah,
running a company. Obviously, he's not doing the nitty, gritty, side of things. And I think
yeah,
with Epic, and let's say if we just talk about Unreal Engine, he
mhm,
just did a lot of things good and obviously some things really well. And like you said, there are some things, and it'll be the same with every product, whether it's a game engine, whether it's a
mhm,
game, but like there'll be a few things that are wonky about it. But like overall, it did it well. Like it had a lot of features, a lot of capabilities within the engine. They
mhm,
had, they got good documentation, that helps along with videos. And they've obviously, in the early days when they was giving the Unreal Engine, away, the editor away with like a game that might use the, engine like Unreal Tournament or Quake, for example. But they gave that away. It grew, and a lot of other games started using it. So there was that motivation from developers to learn it, because
mhm,
everyone wants Unreal or Unity or
mhm,
maybe one other engine. They're not going to use the more obscure one. So
mhm.
there's that motivation there as well, and it's just done everything to a decent level,
Yeah.
and that's worked out for them. And obviously with
Yeah.
Fortnite, that's just catapulted it.
Yeah, and but that's like I think like the thing that like really kind of makes me admire that process, and what they've pulled off there is that it's not just a technical problem that they solved really well. They were
No.
able to get all the business dev and all the like marketing and all of that kind of into this neat little package that's really worked out for them. I'm sure the journey for them was also very hectic, and it's also happened over the course of like decades at this point.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I
but
think
you
it
know,
also
yeah.
helped. So sorry to cut you off.
Mhm,
I think it's also helped that they make their own games. Like you get, there's so many engines out there, 3D and 2D,
mhm,
and the companies themselves that make these engines or maintain these engines
mhm.
don't really have much of a push in making games themselves.
Yeah,
That's like a huge, huge, advantage of it, because they created the engine initially for their own games.
right.
Then they obviously was releasing it, packaging it with like Unreal Tournament. Then they could just download it for free. When it was UDK back in the day, like about
Mhm,
15 or so years ago, and obviously it's got to Unreal Engine 5 now. But yeah, it's that interest within the gaming industry. One, they obviously will understand what developers need because they are the developers themselves. They'll understand the platform because they're making games, and obviously they've had a lot of success with Fortnite. But as a result, they understand, okay, these features are required in these types of games. Let's streamline and optimize for those gameplay mechanics, those features, that
mhm.
sort of data
Yeah,
retrieval or whatever it is,
yeah,
because that's what people want. Yeah,
yeah,
there might be features in Unreal that are rubbish, but
mhm.
if nobody really is asking for those features. But that's the thing, because they make games, they understand what it takes to make games. Therefore, they're good at making engines. It's crazy. Like, I don't. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Unity really has any major push themselves in making games, or like the Godot
It tried
engine,
once, but it
or
didn't go very well.
yeah, or some of these other ones. Like they just don't do it, and the ones that do don't release their engines. Like you got Valve.
Mhm,
Obviously, Source Engine, that is, so they do have some of that open source, but but they leave it closely knit. Or GTA, Rockstar with their, what's it called, Rage Engine, and but that's private. And that's the reason the engine is so good, because they make it for a game, for a
mhm,
specific game, and not just a general set of developers that might, be able to use it.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. They did a really like, a good job of kind of building up that kind of user base and also their own repertoire of games. Yeah, I think it's like what you kind of also described as like a being like a big learning curve for me as well. Like, and kind of in this journey of like writing abstract and like putting it out there and having people use it and like kind of hearing about what they think, and that's been like a big, hearing that feedback and learning to kind of humbly like learn about what they're talking about and what people want and things like that. It's a very challenging thing to do, and it's not a technical problem, but it's a very difficult thing to do on like a almost like a personal level at this point. um and yeah, just like seeing people that are able to pull that off very well and also have the persistence to be able to do this for like decades at this point. It's yeah, that's kind of my hero.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that there's so many other, aspects to, whatever it is. You have the core thing. Let's say if it's the technical aspect, but then
Mhm.
there's so many other things that takes, to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like I had to almost like let go of parts of the technical ambitions that I had for abstract. Like one of the reasons why I initially wrote a language was not because it was like what people wanted, but because like I wanted to write a
Yeah,
language.
it's what interested
Uh,
you. So it's what
yeah,
you
yeah,
found
yeah.
fun.
But I've had to kind of learn to let go of that because like there are so many languages out there that have their unique set of features and kind of paradigms that they're offering, that like if that is not your primary focus, it is very hard to compete with that. And that's like what I've run into with abstract is like we also use abstract internally to build our own game for a while, and one of the things that we kind of kept running into is like it's so expensive to write a language like that. Um, and but what we're starting to realize is like, well, the primary value that people are finding out of abstract is not the language. Primary value that people are finding out of abstract is a translation tech, right? Like the
Hmm.
ability to switch between code and nodes. But like but that was like a really hard pill to swallow because I was so proud of that. I was like, I wrote my own language.
I know it's not an easy. It's not. You don't come across that often. Somebody that's wrote a language to a good, level. Like yourself. Like you can come across a bunch if you're within the, programming community. You can come across a bunch of people that's made a website, made an app, made a game, that sort of stuff. But to say, you made your own language, or let's say if you made your own editor, for example, like it it is a very rare, thing,
Yeah.
to have. So yeah, there definitely can be ego and pride in that, because you've gone
Mhm.
so far down it.
Yeah.
Whereas, let's say if you make a tic tac toe game like Clone, you're
Mm,
probably not going to have the same sort of ego, because one, millions of people have already created literally that game before, and
mhm.
two, it's not as complicated as, let's say, some other games.
Yeah. Yeah, that ego and pride, it's a very challenging thing to kind of let go of. I mean, I struggled with it quite a bit, and making the call to abandon it was very challenging. But it was the right thing to do. No, it was what in terms of getting the value into the our users, in a more flexible kind of a way. It was the right thing to do, but man, it's really challenging. Because yeah, man, I was like really proud of it, but man, I was like, but like also kind of being told that like this isn't very valuable, that's like a huge like ego hit as well, right? But I think learning from that experience and kind of shifting like pivoting the company towards this more IDE focused kind of a product, um, it just opened up so many possibilities for us, and it was really the right thing to do. But it was it's one of those things where it just kind of required a certain bit of like personal growth on my end to kind of pull that off. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
I yeah, and it also like we are developing like our own games internally, and
Hmm.
it like really helped with that initiative as well because like building a language and then building like a game off of that thing that you're building the language and then building like a product on top of that language while you're still building the language is like impossibly hard, right? Like
It is.
that
Plus,
was
it teaches you a lot. Like
yeah
let's say you make the language, and you think, yeah, this works fine. But when you actually go to use it in a real world scenario, you're like, this is just cumbersome. Like this is
yeah
just
yeah
stupid. What I'm having to do. Like
yeah
especially when you're as knowledgeable as you are, you think this is so much easier in C++, or this is
yeah
so much
exactly
easier in the thing
yeah.
I'm trying to replace.
Yeah, so we've ended up doing a thing where now we're just shifting the game towards like just to like I'm just basically writing the game in C++, and I'm basically using the C++ as like test data for the IDE because like the IDE is kind of written in like a more generic way that it can kind of work for like all sorts of like text-based languages, so like I'm trying to like figure out like how to make it work for like really simple languages like Lua, but also kind of have a framework that will allow it to work with like C++ as well. And it's like very like challenging, but at the same time I've kind of like decoupled these things from each other. So as like a business, it's been like much easier to handle these two products separately. So like it was definitely like a huge kind of development to happen in the company, but in terms of making the call, man, it was like really 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 challenging. But yeah, it's definitely the right way to go. It's man, like that initial call to write the language and then build a game on top of that was a not the best call, not the smartest move that I've made ever.
So, talking about creating your own language, would
Mm.
you advise somebody to go down that route, to create their own language? And, talking about advice, what other advice would you give to aspiring, game developers or especially entrepreneurs that are interested in this sort of space, especially the middleware industry?
If the product that you want to build, if the core value proposition of the product that you want to build is the language, then that's what you should do. Um, but what you should be very careful about is understanding that especially for people like me that just love engineering, it could very well be that you just want to make a language because you like making languages, right?
You want
So
something technically challenging, something
yeah,
different.
it's something to bite into and have a good time
Yes.
with. So self-awareness is very very challenging, but it's arguably almost more important in this entrepreneurship setting than your technical skills. Obviously your technical skills is if you are that kind of a person, that is your core, the core value that you kind of bring to the table as a person, but you also have to understand that this is no longer a technical problem. um, and also and In terms of entrepreneurship, uh the biggest mistakes that I've made and the things that I have to really learn from is not having the ability to listen. Because there it's not, the thing that like really keeps me up at night is like there were people that's told me this, like before. But like I still did it anyways because I didn't, I guess probably part of it is like I didn't have the self-awareness to really understand this about myself, but also I didn't really feel the pains that comes with making a mistake like this, that kind of allowed me to learn these lessons, right? And I think the people that really succeed in this like entrepreneurship, and kind of like this sort of role like fits them like a glove, like those people, they're able to really really listen, and just allow their product and their company to kind of be formless and kind of fit what the market and what their advisors and whatnot are telling them it needs to be. um so I think like that ability to kind of decouple yourself from your company and like have a self-awareness about yourself and understand what the company is and what it means to you, that's like a really challenging but very very important thing to kind of know. um, and also, don't take 2 years to put your product out. That's a big, that can be, that's a too long of a time. Your product should be out the door, half the time from that. So if you're, one of the things that I was told before is like, the development plan is a little bit too long. I think that was true. I think the product needs to be out the door a little bit faster. And if you kind of take the scope of your product and you feel like it's going to take that long, you're probably not focusing on the value proposition enough. um, yeah, that's probably it. Probably a repeat of what a lot of other people are saying, but cliches are cliches for a reason, I think.
I mean, 100%. Like, a lot of the time, things that other people are saying, or what's cliche or common knowledge is usually based in some sort of reality. So
Yeah, yeah,
definitely be open to listening to it, and something
yeah.
that when you're young, especially when you're an entrepreneur, because you're being a bit different, you don't
Mhm.
want to listen to it. I know I've done
Yeah.
that thing in my journey. Like, I don't want to listen to it, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're there and you're hearing the advice, and you in that moment are thinking this is good advice, like
Yeah.
this is better than what I'm doing, or
Mhm.
there's merit here, but you
Yeah.
just double down. Like,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't go against what you're doing, like even if it's just an extension of it, it's like
Mhm.
that. It's kind of that pride thing. I didn't think of it. I'd
Mhm.
have to kind of give credit to that person. They're gonna mention it, that
Yeah.
they thought of it, that
Yeah.
thing. But like,
Yeah.
if it's good, I mean, it's good. Like, and nobody's gonna take away the fact that you've put the hours in to, achieve it, like make it whatever they've said.
Mhm.
So there's nothing wrong with outside advice. It's actually really helpful
Yeah.
and really useful. And it's good to have people around that might you know mention something that can be beneficial.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
opens the mind.
Yeah. I honestly, like, I say all these things now because like I've kind of experienced these things, and these lessons have been kind of almost been forced on me from these experiences that kind of made me kind of confront the realities. But at the same time, when you're in that position of like first starting out, you, to a certain extent, you also have to see for yourself. So like, it could, I can see like, like these advice, it kind of just becomes another voice in the in like this crowd of people saying the same thing. um so like, I think in the end, the only really way to do it is to just take that leap and kind of just do what you feel is right. um but eventually you're going to have to learn these lessons, I think. Yeah. Like a lot of times, like you kind of just go into it and be like, man, I like really want to do this, and that's what's making you take those steps and put in those hours, then that's what's making you put in those hours. So there's definitely a part of that that's almost inevitable. um yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Like you kind of look back and you almost want to just go to people and be like, hey, listen, like I know I've experienced these things, like listen to me. But at the same time, like you can also see like yourself at that point and kind of see like, well, I get it though. Like I get what you're doing. Like I get why you're doing that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely is one of those things where sometimes it's just the pain of experience that
Mhm.
you need, and some things just can't be taught without the experience.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking ahead, what are the future plans and goals
Mhm.
for your company, for the editor? How do you envision the company's impact on the
Mhm.
gaming industry in the in the coming years? Because obviously a fair bit's changed since the last time we spoke. Like you said, the abstract programming language is the secondary focus, the editor is the primary focus. So
Mhm.
what's the next 5 to 10 years looking like in your head?
Mhm. So, it, especially the route that we've taken now, because as a company, we still need to fund ourselves, and we've basically dedicated ourselves to bootstrapping the entire company. We've decided not to go with investments and whatnot. It just didn't seem like a right fit. So what we've done now is we are running a lot of contracting and outsourcing work to kind of fund ourselves. What we're doing now is kind of slowing down a lot of the like abstracting the game development side of things and kind of focusing on kind of growing like a team based on this contracting work that we're doing. Um, and also what we've kind of come to realize is my business partner and I are both kind of experienced in the AAA industry, so we have a decent amount of connections that we can leverage to build this outsourcing business. So we're kind of um, we got foot in those three things right now. So we got like the game, and we got the IDE, and then we got the contracting work going on right now. And so far, we've been able to manage it kind of like a fairly evenly split in terms of our time commitment to all of these things. But what we would like to do is kind of grow the contracting business more, and hopefully eventually kind of offload that to a self-sustaining team, right? And we found ourselves being able to find these opportunities fairly, um, not I won't say easily, but reliably at least. So and there's actually at least more than what we are able to actually fulfill the demand for. So we're actually hiring right now and trying to grow the team that is able to support the contracting side of this business. And in the meantime, like my business partner and I are kind of doing a lot of the R&D for the IDE and the game and whatnot. So eventually, 5 years down the line, the ideal place that we would like to be is what we're doing with the contracting hires right now is that we are hiring folks. And once you're part of our team, you have a choice. You can either work on our R&D projects, and you will be on like a base pay kind of a system that is probably not like the highest, but it will be enough to kind of sustain yourself. But you have a choice of like also working contracts for us, and if you do that, we'll do a profit sharing model where you'll be able to append a portion of the income from the contract that you're running into your base pay. So you if the our what we're trying to do with this business is grow an environment where people can come work for us and have the a lot. What I've seen is that in the game industry, a lot of people have the skills, but also they kind of have the creativity that um, gives them this desire to have the flexibility to sometimes be working on like large projects, but sometimes be working on like R&D projects, right? So we would like to grow the company that way, where you can come work for us and kind of have that flexibility to be able to go between these contracts and our R&D projects. And hopefully in 5 years down the line, we've grown that portion of our business to be large enough so that we can devote more and more time into the R&D projects and kind of grow out abstract and our game based on the team and the resources that we're gathering that way.
Okay, that's interesting. So these sort of, contracts that you do, are they directly related to, the core technologies like abstract, the editor, or is it literally just using your technical coding skills, you're contracting them
Um,
out?
the for the most part, the latter. There's been some conversations about abstract, but especially the technology that allows it to be used with all scripting languages is a little bit too early to be contracted out that way.
Hmm.
So right now we're leveraging a lot of our just raw just game development skills, and also if you come work for us and kind of do those contracting gigs, that will be what it is for the most part. It'll be just kind of just doing the general game development help here and there for other studios. Yeah.
Okay. And those, contracts, are they like, companies hiring your services for, let's say, 3, 6 months on a day rate? Or is it, here's a little project or, a subset of a project that they want you to do? Here's a fixed fee. If it takes you a week, it takes you 2 months. Same fee. Like, what's the sort of, structure around that?
Whatever's that just depends, right? Like that
Hmm.
depends on the client needs. That depends
Of course,
on
yes.
what we're able to offer. So that really just depends. We're very fairly flexible with that on our end, but our clients tend to have more strict needs about that. So it kind of just depends.
Okay. And like, how many people are working for, your company right now, including yourself?
I mean, right now, like we literally just started this like a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So,
Well,
so, so like it's just
what the
two.
contract inside of it?
Y-
or just in
Yeah,
general?
yeah. With no, with the contracting side of it, we literally started like a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So this is like very new. We're just trying it out at this point. We're not really like, this is a plan that we formed, and this is like what we committed to right now. But like we're not 100% like everything settled, and it's like a very sustainable, reliable system yet. It's something that we just kind of just come up with. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. So far it's a very small team, just me and my business partner, but we're like, also starting to do some interviews and whatnot, so we'll see how things go.
Okay, that sounds interesting. And like, what advice would you give to someone that's looking to do some sort of contracting work, for example? Because I know people might have a programming degree, or they want to get into the field, but they don't want to do a typical like 9 to 5, go work for a company. They don't want to start a company themselves, be an entrepreneur in the way that you initially was being with abstract, for example. They
Hmm.
like the idea of doing work for a company or companies, clients, but
Hmm.
kind of being on their schedule, and you kind of on like a level footing almost, so you're not employed by them. So like, what advice would you give? Because you were saying that you found it, relatively easy to get clients. Like,
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, what advice would you give on to getting clients? Like, how did you get them? Were they people that you knew, through other work you had done, or a unique? Because obviously you've worked at a bunch of companies as well, so obviously I guess it's different if you're fresh out of uni, never worked at any companies, but you've worked at SpaceX, NASA, 343, like big titans. So like, was it through those contacts? Like, what's the situation?
Yeah, that helps. That's kind of what we're leveraging here.
That's the magic sauce.
Yeah, that's the magic sauce. So, like, if you're fresh out of uni, it's gonna be very. I don't know if it's even possible, really, unless you just have like a very personal connection or something like that. It's gonna be very challenging to do something like this. And the thing is, like, we kind of have the experience and the skills to be able to jump into projects like this. um like I've like literally wrote like a lot of the technology that goes into like Halo Infinite, so I can, and like there's a lot of, and I've also built up like a reputation for myself in the industry, so uh like that's what we're essentially leveraging here. If you're fresh out of uni, you probably can't do something like this. We like, and that's kind of like what we are also like kind of leveraging when we're kind of going through our hiring process, is like we are trying to vet like the best people that we can find. And what we're offering to them is that, we are able to find these contracts, and these work for them, assuming that they are good enough to be able to support those things, right? Like actually meet the demands that's out there. And it's what I found so far is that most people out of uni do not meet those qualifications, don't really have the experience to be able to meet those things. So
Mm.
if you're fresh, you know still apply, but but
It's going to be difficult, because I'm guessing
yeah.
there's the element of, it's different. Let's say if you're fresh out of uni, you go work for an established company, you're given a small task, you do it, there's documentation, there's sort of, you just stick within the boundaries. But I'm guessing with the sort of contracting stuff that you're doing, especially when you're giving it to other people that come and work for you, there's going
Mhm.
to be a lot of, okay, we don't know, a
Yeah,
lot of the stuff.
yeah, yeah,
You're kind of being an entrepreneur within a contracting company, so like you're
yeah.
kind of creating this and figuring stuff out as if you're an entrepreneur, but for a
Well,
contract, kind
Well,
of.
not exactly. So
No,
one of the things
okay.
that we're offering is that, like, I will be kind of hands-on with a lot of these contracts, So like for example, like I won't be able to do all the coding myself, I won't be, and my business partner won't be able to like be involved in every single animation being created or something like that. But what we are able to do is kind of guide a lot of these people with a lot of talent and a lot of potential, but not the experience. And we're able to augment our experience onto their services being provided to these other companies, right? So for example, like these folks will have never written, a system like gameplay system, that's like AAA quality and scale, But what we're able to do, and what for example, what I'm able to do is like kind of be able to like write a technical design proposal or something like that, and have the implementation be done by this like fresh hire or something like that, right? So it um if you kind of, if this is a kind of like the thing for you, what you'll and for our clients as well, what you'll find is that you're kind of getting the experience that we are able to provide, but be implemented by someone else. So they won't be just thrown in there and then just being solving their own like problems at that AAA level by themselves, because that's kind of unrealistic. That's not really, as also for us as a business, that would be fairly not a very good value proposition that we're offering. So like if you're fresh out of uni, we don't necessarily expect you to have the kind of experience of like building a triple A gameplay system, because like chances are you probably don't. What we are looking for is just the ability to really learn, and be the ability to kind of take these kind of design docs and stuff like that and be able to implement them. And even that's fairly challenging. What I found is that most unis students fresh out of school kind of kids are not really able to do that. So it's very rare that we come across talent. I mean, at this point, I like uh, saw maybe one, but it's been fairly challenging finding those folks. But if that's kind of like where that's like who you are, we'll work with you to work with these clients. So that's kind of like the relationships that we're trying to build through this contracting program.
Okay, that's definitely very interesting. And if somebody's interested in working for you guys, where can they go? Like, what's the link? What's the email?
Yeah. Well, so I'll probably actually send it to you before you post this. But our website has like a contact us, so you can go through there. It doesn't have like an official, like we haven't we've this is so new that we haven't put like a publicly like apply
Hmm.
here have a link yet. But you can always email us. So I'll probably send you the email as well. But here you can email me, almost like you can actually email me directly as well. P1PWON at abstractsoft.net. There's also info at abstractsoft.net. Those two are probably what we're going to use for now. Although we'll probably, as this gets more built out and as we kind of build out the process more formally, we'll probably have like other links as well. So we'll probably post that on our website as it gets updated. But yeah, those two emails are a good place to start.
Okay, sounds good. Like I said, I'll get all those links off
Mhm,
you, and they'll be in the in the description, so you can check them out.
mhm,
So yeah, that's my more specific questions done around your career, around what you're doing right now. But I would like to end it with some more fun generic questions.
mhm,
So
yeah.
I think this will definitely be an interesting one, especially because you're in your own company. Would you rather run a 10-person company, which you're within that right now, or a
Mhm.
1,000-person company, and why?
10. 100%. That's a
10.
personal. Yeah,
Okay.
that's yeah, yeah, 10. That's more of a personality thing, I think. But I think what I'm really enjoying about this process is that uh like it's that close knit kind of a feeling
Mm,
is really nice, and also kind of having more visibility into like how the culture is forming and like what kind of relationships that we're kind of forming with each other. That's really cool to me. So whereas like in like a 1,000 person company, say like 343 Industries, like individually, I made some really good friends out of it, but like as a company as a whole, it's so nebulous. It's so hard to tell like what's going on where, and like why things are happening, and like and all that. So I've learned to really love this kind of small scale operation that I've been running. So yeah, definitely 10.
okay. Yeah. I mean, a few of the people that I asked everyone this question, but a few that I've asked that have gone, pretty far beyond the 10-person, mark already. Like they all say, the temper, like they prefer the 10-person days, for the reason that you say, it is more personal. You know everyone's name.
Yeah.
There's more accountability as well. There's better communication. Less red tape, less bureaucracy, and I guess fun as well. To an
Mhm.
extent, but I guess that depends on the, like you said, on the individual. Some people may prefer managing 1,000 people versus doing the technical nitty gritty side, and the technical nitty gritty side might just have been a means to an end. And the sooner they could get off that, the sooner they got off it. And now they're on, like I said, managing managers. Managers are managing, leads, and the leads are, heading
Yeah.
up, development teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely is a personal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. Once you go beyond, let's say if you're at, let's say 500 or 1,000 people in your company and it's doing well, you practically can't go back. Like you can't really just say, you know what, we're doing 100 million a year, but I'm going to fire 90% of my staff and just do 5 million a year. I mean, do you know of any company that's ever done that? Like said, I preferred it when it was smaller. There's no reason for us to actually, shrink, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. That's
imagine the news, like some big tech company, it's worth $10 billion, and but the CEO or the founders just aren't enjoying it anymore, and they reduce it to a $10 million company. That would that
I mean,
I
I don't
would
know. I don't know what the hell's going on in Twitter right now, but it almost sounds that way.
But I feel like with Twitter, it's less because obviously Elon Musk has taken it over. It's less about the original guys wanting to go smaller and more just there's just a lot of waste,
Yeah.
there. Because
Yeah, that's
from
fair.
what I've read about Twitter is the engineering and the technical side is second, and the
Mhm.
other stuff like the design and I guess the human interaction stuff is more primary. And I think that's why some of the technical side, like certain features, take ages or they think it's more complex than it is because they're not that hardcore of a development team. Because in reality, when you look at it, like Twitter's just pretty much just Twitter. Whereas when you look at Facebook or Meta now, they got Facebook.com, they've got Quest as well, they've got Instagram, they've got Threads that they just, recently released. They got WhatsApp. They made React as well. So, and React Native, and then there's some stuff with the, LLVM stuff as well.
Mhm.
And so many other stuff. When you see what they've done from a social media, platform
Mhm.
and versus what Twitter's done, like I think Twitter could have easily have done something on that level if they had been more technical, focused and oriented.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, more money and business oriented as well, because obviously Facebook, was a money printing machine as well.
Mhm.
Twitter less so.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's an understatement.
Oh yeah, yeah. Twitter is yeah. I mean, it's definitely an interest, and I actually wonder if, let's say, if there was I mean, Twitter's big, but it's not Google big. Let's say somebody had the bank to take over Google, they took them over, and they just laid off 95% of the staff. I wonder if the government would be like, no, like
I don't know.
they only if they would start stepping in.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, they're so big at this point, and they're like literally, they're like a like
They
insignificant portion of the economy at this
their
point. So, like,
infrastructure. Like they
yeah,
can't take the risk of, even if they say nothing's going to change and we're just I don't know, we're just reducing. Uh, like Twitter's not that significant in reality. Yeah, it's it's caused a few riots or a few movements in certain countries, but but it's not there on the infrastructure level of Google, Microsoft, even Facebook. Yeah, because
mhm,
imagine if Mark Zuckerberg was like 95% stuff going tomorrow for no real because it's hard for the government to say, okay, you've got a lot of people, but and you're taking 10% of them away, but financially speaking you need to do it. Like it's hard for them to say no to that. But
mhm,
if there's no real reason and they just say we're going to wipe out 95% of our staff,
mhm,
like I feel like the government for a big organization would step in or try and do something, because they step in when companies are trying to buy other companies for too much money,
mhm,
and in reality it's a private company, or even if it's a public company, it's a company that's not government buying a company that's not government, but they still step in and they
mhm.
still cause issues, or they still put the brakes on. So I feel like they could, and they might, if something crazy like that did happen, where Google, like, when laying 95% of the people off for no actual reason.
Yeah, yeah. That'd be. definitely a crazy scenario.
Oh yeah, I mean that would be something like a Black Mirror episode.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I mean, would you rather have 5 million US dollars up front right now, or 500,000 a year for the rest of your life, and why?
Half a million a year.
You
No,
going down that route?
yeah. No, I mean just because like, the whole point of like me doing this of abstract and stuff is because I kind of like, I can pay my bills like, just fine. And I don't really have like the desire to kind of like have a crazy luxurious life or anything like that. I kind of just wanted the freedom and just be able to do what I like doing and kind of just be able to support myself while doing that and still be able to like make all the calls myself. And half a million bucks a year will definitely do that. So and like I'm sure like if you have like what, like I don't know what you said, $500 million up front.
No, no, no. It was just 5 million, so it wasn't even
Oh,
super
5
crazy.
million. Okay, it was okay. Like I mean, yeah, 5 million bucks a year. Like say you get like lowball like 5% return on that like every single year, and you can just like live off of that too. Um, but like it's I don't know. I think because like like 5 million bucks, I'll probably if I have 5 million bucks, I'll probably try to do like a venture with it. Whereas like half a million bucks a year will probably just get me to kind of just keep doing what I'm doing, which I kind of really enjoy at this point. So yeah, I'll say half a million bucks a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite board game and favorite movie?
Board game. Ooh.
Yeah.
I haven't played too many board games, but I really did like Monopoly when I was a
Oh, I love
kid.
that game. I feel like playing it.
Uh, and
I
I
mean,
really, yeah.
I feel like you never end up finishing it. You
No, I mean
start it.
that's not the point. I just want to, like,
Yeah.
piss somebody off or like.
I'm always that guy that's trying to keep everyone playing, and so like, let's just finish it, let's just
Yeah,
finish it, and
yeah,
like people just start going away, or they say, we'll put it to the side, we'll play later on, and I'm like,
never
mother just
gonna.
pack it away. Nobody's coming back.
Yeah,
Nobody is coming back after 4 hours to play Monopoly, especially when they was already in a dire financial situation in the game.
yeah,
They're definitely.
and
I mean,
yeah,
they might come back if they're balling, but chances are
uh,
if they're balling, they don't want to postpone the game.
yeah. Like rich people want to keep playing, and poor like players don't. It's like, oh my god, it's like. It's like, oh, who knew that that's like how it's gonna play out? Yeah,
Oh
like
yeah.
Monopoly is kind of fun for like the first like 100 turns, and then it's like, okay, I think I'm like getting my fill. Like Risk is also pretty fun, although I was never really good at it. I did want to get into like the like Warhammer like tabletop stuff, but
Hmm.
like I don't know if I have the time or the money or the patience to do that right now. But maybe someday. Um,
Yeah, that can be quite
yeah,
expensive. I mean, I've never been into it, but I've had friends when I was at school that was into it. I remember them telling me how much those small figurines cost, like the unpainted
yeah,
ones, and then like this.
yeah,
I was like, Jesus Christ! Like it is almost a lifestyle.
yeah, yeah.
Like
It is. Yeah,
to that point, like the
yeah,
amount of money that you can spend on this stuff is,
yeah,
I mean, it's still going. So I mean, that stuff is
yeah,
still going. To be
yeah.
fair.
I mean, I recently got into like Total War, and that's like almost like a tabletop for the most part, because like a turn-based thing.
Mm,
But man, it's like Total War Warhammer is really fun. It's really good.
mm,
That's a really fun game. But yeah, I think you also asked like movie.
yes.
Yeah. I don't know, like Pulp Fiction, Fight Club. Those are good.
So some classics
Uh,
there.
yeah, classics. Like the yeah, those kind of like I almost prefer the older Tarantino stuff than like the newer Tarantino stuff. Um, uh, I don't know. I would say I'll probably like the specific like directors that have like a very unique style. Like Wes Anderson, Tarantino, all that.
Martin Scorsese,
Martin
and
Scorsese is very good. Yeah, Godfather's very. What's his name? I cannot remember the Coppola.
yeah,
Yeah, he's
Francis
very good.
Ford Coppola. Yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Very good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
those
mean,
are good, yeah.
have you seen the trailer for the new Ridley Scott movie, Napoleon?
Oh, I did. I just really like Napoleon, like, history in general. I really
Yeah,
wonder how that's gonna turn out, because like they cover, like, the trailer showed like a whole bunch of stuff,
he
like,
covered a lot. I know. I was
yeah. So
thinking
I don't know
it
how
needs to be
long it's
long.
gonna be. Yeah, so like if it's really long, it's like this like Napoleon epic. Oh, that'd be really really
Oh
cool.
yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
love that. Yeah.
I really want to see more super long films. Obviously, I don't want every film. Like sometimes I enjoy like an hour and 40 minute film,
Hmm.
but so sometimes I do just want like a 3 4 hour, epic where it is like a whole evening kind of thing, and maybe you're basing your meal around that, or you're having a bit of a break as a like, especially if you're watching it at home. Like, I do want some more epic movies that are 3 4 hours,
Yeah.
long.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see like how like Joaquin Phoenix, like portrays Napoleon and stuff. That'd
Mm,
be like really cool. Yeah, but
yeah.
like yeah, Joaquin Phoenix being Napoleon for like 3 4 hours, like I'll pay for that. I'll
Yes.
definitely pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looks good, and Ridley Scott doing those type of historical movies and those sort of movies that really get you gripped. He's definitely good at that. So, I mean, that'll be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, final question, two-parter: does money buy you happiness, and what does a good life mean to you?
Money buy you happiness. Enough money will make happiness possible. That's
Okay,
outside of
okay,
the um,
that's interesting. So,
but there's a
how
saying.
much is the enough? How much is the
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
then
yeah.
in
Well,
your head?
see, there's a saying that, like, if you think there's such thing as enough money, you will never be rich. So, who knows? I'll probably never be rich. But enough for me is like, just being able to pay all my bills. If I got like a house and a yard, I think that's good enough. Um, I think I actually really enjoy just kind of like just having like friends over, and like, just having like a grill night kind of a thing or something, and that's because that stuff makes me really happy. And if I got, the time and the kind of flexibility to do the work that I like, that's kind of the stuff that makes me really happy. So, that's like enough. That, you know to your, previous question, like $500,000 a year will probably cover that. Maybe even multiple times over, or like maybe twice over. But yeah, it's like something like that. That's the kind of like enough for me. I forget what the second question was.
So it's just extension of that, really. Like, what does a good life mean to you? I mean, you kind of already
Oh,
touched on that then, but
yeah, just I just want to be, healthy, and like, have a, just like a nice house, and uh just yard, and kids, and all that. So that kind of life, just a chill life.
yeah,
Yeah. And if I got, if abstract does well, and then we kind of grow to that like 10, 15 people level, and I get to maintain that throughout the rest of my life, I think I'll be pretty happy.
yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely something that's underrated, because there's a lot of people out there that are think about starting a company or look at people starting a company, and like their thing is always Google, Facebook, Microsoft, like going as
Hmm.
big as you can. But
Hmm.
like, there's plenty of people out there that are at that, like you said, that 10, 15, maybe 20, 30 people mark, and they just stay
Yeah.
there. Like, they don't want to go beyond, or like, let's say they're a restaurant owner and they have a couple more, restaurants, but
Yeah.
they don't try and go international, even
Yeah.
though they probably could if they tried. But they're just
Yeah.
happy to be on that personal level, to be able to drive to each restaurant or to each business,
Yeah.
each person, be able to work in it, not have shareholders and board members that restrict you from doing this and that,
Yeah.
and just, yeah, like, did, definitely, I think it's definitely something that's undervalued. I remember me and my wife was driving through a nice neighborhood on the weekend, and there was a bunch of expensive houses, but I was looking at them and I was like, yeah, obviously they're not cheap, but I was thinking, I bet you a bunch of them are just businessmen that got to sort of a medium size, and that's it. Like, people that you would never ever heard of, you would probably never hear know that their business exists, but
Yeah.
they're just doing well, and it's ticking away. Like, they got 20, 30 people, they got a factory, they've got a showroom, they've got whatever it is, they got some agency, and it's done well for them, and they haven't decided to go super crazy. And I think
Yeah.
that helps create that balance in your life to have those meaningful relationships. Because
Yeah.
I, I I believe that if you find any person that's worked super crazy hard, still does to a later stage in their life, runs, let's say, $1 billion companies, I don't think they have the best relationship with the people around them as they could if they just stayed at, let's say, a 50 million size or 100 million size.
Hmm.
And at that point, you are literally like, I mean, I think then you have to think is, what are you defining as success? For example, like, if it is pure money or pure size, okay, they're successful. But if it's having meaningful relationships, being able to take care of your kids, your family, but them still having a good connection with you, then they failed on, obviously, on on that aspect. You've got people that are super rich, top of their industry, and they just don't talk to their kids. The kids just don't talk to them, and
Mm.
it's definitely not a money issue, like, for sure,
Yeah.
or a resource issue there.
Well, like it's hard to tell, like, if there's like what sort of like personal lives that these folks are living. But I think there's definitely something said about like there's a definite underappreciation of how much impact is made by those double-digit million-dollar companies. Like most of the world is those companies.
Mm,
You only
they are,
hear
yeah.
about the biggest companies, but there's a very organic process of these companies interacting that drives most of our economy and most of the industry. So I think I'll be happy just being kind of part of that process. And as long as I can pay my bills, I think that'd be pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's all the questions I got, Parker. I appreciate you taking the time to come on to the podcast today. It's been really insightful. I've had a lot of fun, as I did in episode one. I'm glad, we was able to do, part two, because, like I said, the first one was cut short to, I think, an hour or less than an hour. And, this has been a great extension to that. So, anyone that's listening, I'll get all the links of Parker. So, you can check, obviously, what he's doing, or over Abstract and with the editor. Plus, also, obviously, if you want to try and work for him as well, and do be on the contracting, be on the R&D stuff, I'll have those details as well. So yeah, thank you for coming on, Parker. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I was blessed.
Yeah, it was. So I'll see everyone in the next episode of FireDEV next week. Thank you. Bye bye.